Hi and welcome to the Guitar Beasts episode on Squier JV series guitars. I've been a fan of the Squier brand for quite a long time now. I like budget guitars. I think if you spend a bit of time researching a brand, you can find periods in their manufacture, periods of their production where they brought out quality instruments, and obviously with any manufacturer, even the big names, they go through periods of poor quality instruments that they're putting out, and then there are periods of very much sought after guitars. And it's the same for budget brands as it is for the big brands. So the Squier history is fascinating. Essentially what happened at the start of the 80s, Fender were in the doldrums. They were not really living up to their name, really. A lot of Far Eastern guitar builders had started copying the Stratocaster shape, and one of them was the Fujigen plant in Japan, who were putting out, I think, Ibanez guitars with the Stratocaster shape, and they were doing a very good job of it. So Fender were trying to get them to stop sort of plagiarizing the shape and the intellectual property, and in the end they just said, if you can't beat them, join them, and they said, just build the guitars for us. And so that is what happened at the start of the 80s. Fujigen started building Fender guitars, and at the same time, to try to undercut this budget market that had emerged, that was taking market share away from Fender, the Fender company, Fender Musical Instrument Company, FMIC, decided to bring out a budget range under the name Squier. So Squier was originally a guitar string company making guitar strings, called Squier, which Fender acquired, and it became part of their conglomerate. And so they just took that name and used it as the brand for this new line of budget guitars. So the Fujigen plant started putting out Fender brand JV. JV was the serial number that was used on the guitar. Stood for Japan Vintage, because built in Japan, and they were vintage correct Stratocasters based on the earlier 57 and 62 models. So they had all the same specs, same string spacing, that kind of thing. And because the Fujigen guitar builders had such experience in building these, what they call the lawsuit era strats, they were producing very high quality guitars. So it has the JV serial number. I'll show you here. You can see that it starts with JV, and at the top it has the Squier logo with a sort of 70s style Stratocaster font going across the whole top of the headstock, which is sort of odd to see on a Strat with a 60s shape headstock. You're used to seeing that on the ones with the fat 70s headstocks. So that gives it a very distinctive look straight away. So they're very recognizable when you see a Squier guitar that looks like that. But the thing that I love most about this guitar is its playability and its sound. The neck is so beautifully crafted. It is as thin as you like, so you've got plenty of space to get your fingers around. The workmanship at the top of the neck, where the neck meets the headstock, is quite phenomenal. You just see the transition there is seamless. It's been beautifully sanded, and it has this lovely gloss finish, which again I like on a guitar. And of course these vintage drop-in tuners, which are by far the best in my opinion. You don't have any of that surplus string to cut off and the pointy ends to prick yourself on. So I love this guitar, and for me it is the epitome of what is good about budget guitars. It's when you you can get an absolute diamond of a guitar from a budget brand if you know what you're looking for, if you play a few and find the guitar that suits you. So this is the neck pickup. Obviously the in-between select and you get that lovely Fender quack. And then the bridge. Give that a bit of fuzz. So Fujigen began producing Fender guitars for Fender and also the Squier brand guitars, and there was very little difference in the first couple of years of production. So apart from the logo on the headstock, the guitars have many similarities, and it turned out that Fujigen were doing such a good job that in retrospect, looking back on that period of production from the American plants, a lot of people say that the guitars coming out of Japan were better than the Fender, American built Fenders. And even in these first couple of years of production of the Squier brand, the pickups that they were using are American built Fender Alnico single coils, and they have a fantastic tone. But it's not just the pickups. The workmanship, the craftsmanship of the entire instrument is beyond reproach. It is just a fantastically playable instrument. After the JV series, they brought out an A series, and then the serial number changed to SQ, and those were the guitars with a 70s style headstock. But by that point, I think they were starting to change the pickups for ceramic pickups, and so the later Squier guitars that came out of Japan, they didn't have such high quality hardware. But these early JVs are becoming massively sought after because a few years ago it was possible to pick them up for next to no money on garage sales or whatever, because they were Squiers, and people just assumed that Squiers were uninteresting, cheap budget guitars. But I've had this now for 5 or so years, and it is by far my favourite playable Strat, and I own several Fenders. It just has that mojo. It just fits together perfectly. The neck is playable, it sounds gorgeous. I have a lot of time for the JV, but also I will come into some of my other videos. I'm going to go into some of my other Squiers that I own. There are other periods in the Squier production where very, very serviceable guitars have been put out at budget entry-level prices.